given that topic. And we have two excellent speakers. Ed Dresser is a Senior Fellow Director of the PLC's Project on Trade and Global Markets. He joined the PLC in 2009 after 8 years at the Progressive Policy Institute. Before joining the TPI, he served as a policy advisor to U.S. Trade Representative Charlie Brzezinski, where he was the USTR's principal policy advisor, speechwriter, and researcher. He has also twice received USTR's prestigious Special Achievement Award. Also, he has served Senator Max Marcus as the Legislative Assistant and Policy Director, and he graduated from Stanford and has a master's degree from Columbia University. Stephen Trady is the sole chair of International Business at CSIS. His experience spans senior positions with the U.S. Department of State, USTR, the GA, major presidential campaigns, Congress, and the private sector. During his time at State, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and Acting Assistant Secretary under Colin Powell. He has also served in senior positions at USTR, and perhaps most impressive to me, given that he was his happen often, he served the International Trade Council on Ways and Means, and also as a Chief Foreign Policy Counsel to a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So that's very unique. He graduated from Duke University and has a law degree from the University of Michigan and has done doctoral studies at Harvard Business School. And with that, I will turn it over to Ed.
Thank you, Troy. Thank you all for coming. It's a great pleasure to be here at KEI. I guess what I would like to do is get to the topic of the morning's discussion, prospects for KORUS in 2010, and kind of a winding road that starts with the United States and our economy and the place trade policy could or should have in the policy looking ahead. Last year, we are all aware, we went through a very difficult and stressful period. Probably the most severe recession, at least since 1974, and likely since the 1930s. And not a U.S. recession alone, but a global economic crisis sparked by a financial crash. In dealing with this crisis, the administration and its foreign partners, I think, drew very carefully and well upon the lessons from the 1930s. Those being, when you have a global crisis and a financial crash, you should not let banks collapse. You should not let an international trade conflict emerge and get out of hand. You should use fiscal stimulus to support employment and reduce the suffering of the public to the extent possible. That, by and large, is what the administration spent its first year doing. And I think generally fairly successfully, arresting a panic, beginning to stabilize the economy, and ending the first year with not a worsening crisis, but a rebuilding period to come. Families, meanwhile, adjusted in their own way. This has, I think, been less studied or less publicized, but the behavior of the American public has changed pretty drastically and in ways that are important to trade. For most of this decade, we were getting growth through shopping and through home buying and through borrowing to buy cars and so forth. At mid-decade, 2005, 2006, 2007, families were earning about $10 trillion a year and saving about $180 billion of it. As the crisis began, 2008, that moved up to about $280 billion in family savings a year. And when it really hit home last year, it increased to $510 billion or so over the course of 2009. So families looking around at their circumstances, feeling less secure in their jobs, needing more of a financial cushion for unemployment, having a $300,000 house instead of a $500,000 house, and now beginning to worry about retirement, began putting money in the bank. In total, shifting about $350 billion, about 2.5% of GDP, out of consumption and into savings. So when we think about, for example, a fiscal stimulus bill, $800 billion over 2 years, that is a bit more than enough to compensate for the loss of personal consumption, the loss of shopping, the loss of borrowing to buy homes, and so on. Now we look ahead. My guess is that families are not going to suddenly shift back to shopping and going to malls and auto dealerships very quickly. They have been pretty badly bruised. They're still worried about employment. They're aware that they're not quite so rich as they had thought. That means if we're going to have a strong recovery, we have to find about 2% of GDP somewhere to replace the 2% of GDP that has gone out of consumption to savings. Where can that come from? There are several options. One is a prolonged fiscal stimulus program of more spending, more emergency projects. I think the fiscal stimulus program to date is not beloved. I don't think the public likes it very much, although I think the public is benefiting from it pretty considerably. And it causes some alarm within the public and in the political system about building up of debt. So I think probably there will be a jobs bill or a second smaller stimulus bill coming up, but I'm not sure there will be any beyond that. The second option is to get businesses investing again. In order to do that, businesses need to think that they'll have some customers to buy the goods and services they make. And if families are not going to be those customers, then probably businesses will be reluctant to start investing again. The only other option is to find foreign markets through exports. Businesses can do some of that on their own, but I think it would be good for the U.S. government to have a kind of strong export promotion and market opening and trade enforcement program that will help them. This, in turn, means we need to think about our trade strategy, the types of things that are on the agenda, and whether they'll make the contribution over the long run that we need, and to what extent they can contribute in the next couple of years. Over the past decade, our trade policy has been concentrated on a series of free trade agreement relationships. Since the year 2000, President Clinton signed the U.S.-Jordan Free Trade Agreement. We have done, I believe, 9 FTAs with 14 partners. To some extent, these have been pretty stressful and controversial in the political system, but in terms of economic impact, probably rather small. And all of these 14 partners together, roughly about 3% or maybe 5%, depending whether you're measuring from exports or imports, 3 to 5% of U.S. trade. So not enough, especially if you think about trade as, on the import side, about 18% of GDP, and the export side, 14 or 15%, is not enough to have the impact we need. So I think over the long run, the administration will need to be thinking about how to shift the trade agenda from a series of FTAs to broader agreements that deal with our major partners, or deal with regions of the world as a whole, or that deal with the big industries that Americans are looking to for growth and innovation and quality jobs and so forth in the coming years. That sort of thing will take some time, not an infinite amount of time, but some time to devise and more time to implement. In the interim period, the administration has 3 free trade agreements with Korea and Panama and Colombia signed, awaiting ratification, each one with some complications and difficult sectoral issues or conceptual issues to work through. Of these, the agreement with Korea is the one that has the potential to have some considerable impact. Korea is quite a large trading partner. If you think of the export side of things, China is a market for about $80 billion in goods and services exports. Japan about 70, Korea about 60. Korea is